Good afternoon and welcome to INSA's week-long New IC Empowering Women and Engaging Men virtual symposium. Today's session is Female Trailblazers in Intelligence and National Security. Now please welcome INSA President Suzanne Wilson-Hecken.
Good afternoon. Welcome to our week-long The New IC Empowering Women and Engaging Men Symposium. Now in its fourth year, this program continues to be a valuable forum for important discussions about diversity and inclusion in the intelligence community. I'm personally inspired by the turnout for this program. We have close to 600 registered attendees, as well as an incredible lineup of speakers ready to tackle the tough issues. Each year, I'm delighted to see that we have more and more men engaging in the conversation. This year is no exception. To kick things off, our panelists today will share their experiences about breaking down barriers in their careers and offering advice to those who are following in their footsteps. Each has a powerful story to share, and I look forward to what promises to be a lively conversation. I encourage everyone to keep an open mind regarding our speakers' unique individual experiences, both personally and professionally. If each of us does, my hope is that we will leave this week's programming with some lessons learned and actionable best practices that can be brought to our respective teams in the workplace and at home as well. But before we begin, I have some brief housekeeping items. We encourage audience participation all week long. If you have questions, please submit them through the Q&A box on the right side of your screen. We are pleased to welcome several members of the press to this week's program, so this is a reminder that the program is on the record. We also encourage you to share your thoughts and reactions to these conversations this week on social media using the hashtag #TheNewIC. And did I mention we have a live networking reception on Thursday evening? If you have not signed up, please do so after today's program. And finally, I would like to thank all of our sponsors: Booz Allen Hamilton, Esri, Exeger, GDIT, Guidehouse, Mantech, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon Intelligence and Space, and SAIC. We could not deliver this kind of programming without the support of our partners. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Debbie Herndon, Program Director and DIA Business Area Manager for SAIC. Debbie, over to you.
Thank you, Suzanne, and good afternoon. On behalf of SAIC, we are honored to sponsor this program. As the premier Fortune 500 technology integrator driving our nation's technology transformation, our key to success is our unwavering commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. At SAIC, it starts with leadership. We encourage diverse teams, equitable employee experiences, and inclusive culture where all employees can be their authentic selves, feel empowered, and equal opportunities for career advancement. With that, it is now my pleasure to introduce the moderator for today's panel discussion. An IC Trailblazer, Tish Long, served as the Director of NGA from October 2010 to October 2014, becoming the first woman to lead a major intelligence agency. She started her career in national intelligence and went on to serve as the Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence, where she was the first female senior executive service member. Tish was the first Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, Policy Requirements and Resources, the first CIO and later Deputy Director of the Defense Intelligence Agency. She is a proud alumni of Virginia Tech, where she earned her BS in electrical engineering. She also has a Master of Science in Mechanical Engineering from the Catholic University of America. Please join me in welcoming INSA's Chairman, Tish Long.
Thank you, Debbie, for that kind introduction. I'm glad you got the Hokies in there. And thanks again to SAIC for sponsoring today's event. Good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to the first event of the week, IC Female Trailblazers in Intelligence and National Security. And what a lineup of women we have for you today. I'd like to begin with a short introduction of our panelists and then launch right into a conversation. With us today, we have Ambassador Gina Abercrombie Winstanley, who is currently serving as the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at the Department of State. The ambassador was also the longest-serving U.S. ambassador to Malta. Ambassador Abercrombie Winstanley was also the Consul General in Saudi Arabia, the first woman to hold the post. She has also held senior positions in the Department of Defense, at the White House, and on Capitol Hill. Welcome, Ambassador Abercrombie Winstanley. We also have with us the Honorable Ellen McCarthy, former Assistant Secretary of State for Intelligence and Research. Prior to that, Ellen was the president of Nobles NSP, a technical services company. She was also the Chief Operating Officer of NGA, and she was the president of INSA. Among Ellen's firsts were rising to the highest levels in government, industry, and the nonprofit world, not just in one of those, but in all three. Next, we have Dr. Jennifer Smith, who was the first female PhD hired by the FBI. Jennifer is a retired 23-year veteran of the Bureau, having served as special agent. Dr. Smith oversaw DNA analysis at the FBI lab and supervised the Weapons of Mass Destruction Intelligence Analysis section. She also served at the CIA, where she led the Biological Technology Center. Dr. Smith was most recently the director of the Department of Forensic Services for the District of Columbia. And she is joining us from right outside London. She gets the prize for virtually traveling the furthest. Tracy Walder is a former CIA officer who was a staff operations officer for the Counterterrorism Center Weapons of Mass Destruction Group. While at the CIA, she traveled extensively in Europe and the Middle East. Tracy was also an FBI special agent, specializing in Chinese counterintelligence operations. Most recently, Tracy has written a book, The Unexpected Spy. Congratulations, Tracy. I actually haven't had a chance to read it, but I'll be looking for a signed copy soon.
Thank you, Len. Thank you.
And to round out the panel, we have Matisse Wright Springer, a senior vice president in Booz Allen's aerospace business. Matisse was the first African-American female naval flight officer, logging thousands of hours in both the EC-130 and the E-6 aircraft. I bet you have some good stories to tell, Matisse. After the Navy, she was presidentially appointed to serve as a White House Fellow at the Treasury Department and also served in the Department of Defense as a senior executive. And as I was just doing a little research on all of you, I would believe collectively there are more than 10 advanced degrees around your screens today. So pretty amazing, and just a big welcome to all of you. Thank you all for being with us. So let's start the conversation with Matisse. Matisse, how did you reach your level of success given the sector's gender gap, especially at the leadership level?
Sure. Well, thank you to INSA, and thank you, Tish. It is really a pleasure for me to be a part of this panel and these ladies that have just been amazing leaders in the national security realm. And I think the way I've reached my level of success, especially because naval aviation at the time when I earned my wings was so male dominant, and certainly it was also, not very diverse with color. But the way I kind of was able to achieve my success kind of focus on three words that I kind of carry near and dear to my heart. And it was just, I was courageous. I was a pretty confident young lady when I entered the Naval Academy back in the mid 80s. And I worked hard to be competent at what I did and what I was trying to do. And certainly I never asked to be a trailblazer in any of the things that I've done, to include the current role that I'm in today. But I think those three things have been instrumental for my success. And especially, like I said, in naval aviation, I graduated from the Naval Academy in 1988. And at the time, there was this big movie called Top Gun. Many of us probably remember that. And Richard Gere was call sign Maverick, and Goose was his naval flight officer in the back seat. But Richard Gere and Tom Cruise and Goose didn't look anything like Matisse. So when I got to flight school, there was a bit of a challenge with a couple of my instructors who didn't quite understand what I was there to do, which was simply to learn how to fly safely and to start my career as a young naval officer in the cockpit. And so, again, just embarking on that dream that I had, it required me to have great courage because I didn't care what I looked like. I had a mission and a desire to perform for my country as an aviator. And this is what I wanted to do. It was the thing that kept me going the 4 years at the Naval Academy. And it's what I had my heart set on. And I really didn't want an instructor to question what I was doing in the Navy's flight school, especially when there were, 99% of my colleagues had been with me at the Naval Academy, and they just happened to be guys and no one was questioning them. So again, courage, confidence, and competence have been at the cornerstones of my success, to include being a senior vice president at Booz Allen, which, I joined Booz Allen about 5 months ago. And before I came on board, Booz Allen had actually never had an African-American woman senior vice president or at the partner level. So again, just 5 months ago, I'm breaking down another barrier, and it takes courage to do that. So thanks for the question, Tish.
Matisse, indeed it does take courage. And I have to say, having worked with Booz Allen over many years, I'm actually surprised to hear that in 2021, you were the first woman of color to be in a senior VP role, or even as a partner.
Yes.
I am always struck by the diversity at Booz Allen, and in working with various companies, when I hear but I just can't find qualified candidates, A, we all know that means you're not looking hard enough. And B, I often say, go look at Booz Allen's website and just look at the diversity of their senior leadership. So a little surprised, glad you are still blazing trails there. So courage, confidence, and competence, I think all really strong attributes that any leader needs to be successful. Let me just open it up if anyone else would like to comment and just talk about, because all of us, within intelligence and national security have experienced this gender gap. Is there anything that anyone would like to add to Matisse's answer?
I guess that means I nailed it.
I guess it does. I guess it does. All right. Well, then, Ellen, let's turn to you with the next question, unless you'd like to add anything there. But as a woman leader, what has been the most significant barrier for you in your career, and how did you overcome it?
Thanks, Tish, and thank you, INSA, for inviting me to participate with this esteemed group of women. I'll answer the last question and answer this question and try and sort of fold those together, because I was going to jump in. I will tell you that I think the biggest barrier that I've dealt with, and I would love to hear what my counterparts think, has actually been me. And that's not intended to minimize those real barriers that are out there. So when Matisse talks about, throughout her career, what she faced, whether it was working in Navy aviation or coming to Booz. And so I'm not minimizing those barriers, but I will tell you it was that voice in my head that really prevented me. Most of those barriers are actually not insurmountable. You can overcome them, but you listening to that voice in your head. I'm not going to apply for this job because I have 2 children and I just won't have enough time to put into it. I'm not going to apply for this job because I don't qualify for it when I kind of do. Or, you're sitting in a meeting and you have said something and all the men in the room say the exact same thing. And for whatever reason, their voice is heard, but mine isn't. And so I've assumed that it's because I'm not smart enough, or I need to study harder, I need to work harder. And so I will tell you that, and it's happened earlier in my career, and it still happens today, where I find that voice is constantly talking me, is talking me back. And so what have I done to actually overcome that barrier? I'll tell you, it's events like these. It's actually talking to counterparts, developing a network, to realize that you're not alone in terms of, we all have that little voice that is telling us you can't do this. We work in a very male-dominated career path, all of us do. And so to have like-minded women, or even not, actually, it's better to have unlike-minded women surrounding you to help give you that advice, to have someone to talk to and say, when somebody says, Ellen, you're too nice for this job, is that as stupid as I think it is? How should I handle this? So what I've learned is that it's important to invest in your trade craft and being excellent at what you do, but it's equally important to take the time to develop that network, because those are the people, the mentors, the colleagues, the sponsors. Some of you are sitting on this panel right now, who, when I say, am I crazy for thinking this, or should I go for this, have somebody else to help talk me off the ledge.
Excellent. And I could not agree with you more, Ellen, that often it is ourselves holding us back. And so just hearing you say that, I think, helps people recognize that, yes, I can, and to really work your network there. Ambassador, for you, what's been the most significant barrier in your career, and how did you overcome that?
Thank you. I really liked what Ellen said about it being ourselves, and you really got my thoughts working on that, because I've certainly admitted to, when I didn't get a job or a position, I won't say promotion, but certainly a job or position or a program that I wanted to run. Generally speaking, I would say I now take responsibility for that, but it comes down to not my own questioning of my own abilities or time. I've been blessed with a partner. I can throw as much on him as I need to, and he takes it and keeps on trucking. So we have two relatively sane children after all of these years. But it came down to me not fully understanding the system in which I was working. And I think it's good advice for anyone. You've got to know, we have to know who the deciders, I love that George W. Bush term, who's the decider when you're going for a promotion or a assignment or a position, or you want to run a program. You really have to understand what the process is for the decision making and who gets to make that decision. And I know any number of my colleagues within and outside of the Department of State have stumbled, myself absolutely included, because I thought the decision-making process was over here, or took these 3 steps, when in fact it was over there, and there were 5 steps someplace else that I did not fully understand. So thinking I'd captured something or done my best, and it was that I wasn't in the ballpark because I didn't understand the system.
Excellent, excellent response there. And I think it speaks to the power of having mentors, and those who have walked before you within your own organization. And I'm going to come back to mentoring with everyone. Just to kind of tie those 2 responses together, I can remember when I first went to DIA and was responsible for all of the senior civilians. And when a particular position had been advertised, I was really surprised that when I received the packages for the final selection, there were no women amongst the candidates. So I asked to see all of the candidates who applied, and there were still no women. Nothing could be done. There were any number of qualified men, and so, we picked the most qualified. And then I did a little walkabout and asked directly a number of women who had not applied. And almost to a person, they held themselves back by not applying. So Ellen, to your point, and then Ambassador, to your point, several of them said, oh, but I knew that job was for so-and-so. And I looked at them and I said, really? Are you on the selection panel? Did you write the job advertisement? Did you know that? And so it is just so important to know the process, understand the process and the steps, and not hold yourself back. So thank you to both of you for those answers. We just saw the slide pop up. We do have questions rolling in. Moderator's prerogative. I still have a few more questions before we turn to audience questions, but we certainly will get to them. But Tracy, what is some advice you can share with young women who are entering a male-dominated profession? And I'll say a as opposed to our, because we may have some who have joined us today who are in different professions, who are simply looking for advice from some pretty amazing, talented, successful women as yourselves. So Tracy, over to you.
Well, thank you so much for the question, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today. It's funny, I guess, kind of tacking on what everyone said. After I had a kind of call with all of you, my first email was that, you know, I don't deserve to be on this panel. So I think sort of going back to what the ambassador was saying, and what Ellen and Matisse were all saying is, and something I tell the young women that I teach now is, you know, don't tell yourself no, let someone else tell you no. And so that's kind of how it works with this whole application, but this can be applied sort of across the board. But some of the things that some of the nuggets I would like to give to women looking to enter these professions, I think, you know, the first one is know what you bring to the table, because we all bring something to the table. Every single person does. And really think about that. I think as women, sometimes it's difficult for us to see the positive or the unique things that we bring to the table. A lot of us are taught not to have, you know, large egos, and I don't think we need to have a big ego, but know what you bring to the table. You got this job just as fairly as everyone else. So what is it that you have that you bring to the table? And sometimes it's tangible, and sometimes it's maybe an emotional skill or a soft skill. So I think knowing what you bring to the table, in my opinion, is key. And I think the second thing that I encourage folks to do is find role models, but the role models don't always have to be female. You know, the role models can be male and female, and I think that's okay. I think sometimes we get into this focus of it can only be female, it can only be female, and I did have incredible female role models at the CIA and at the FBI, but quite frankly, I also learned a lot from my male colleagues as well, and they can be an asset in terms of helping you sort of climb that ladder and be successful within your career. So those would be sort of the two pieces of advice that I would like to share.
That's terrific, Tracy. And I really want to emphasize, you know, those different role models. You know, if all of our role models or all of our mentors are just like us, it's like giving ourselves advice. So you really want to get that diversity of thought, that diversity of background and experience, so that you actually get advice that makes you say, oh, wow, I'm not sure I could do that. You know, it's okay to be a little bit uncomfortable. I think that's how we grow. So I think really well said. Jennifer, Dr. Smith, what's some advice that you would share with young women who are entering a male-dominated profession, which you have certainly been in over your career?
Yes, I'm like all of you. I'm sure you were often the only woman in the room, and you would look around. And I just want to share with you that I think it's extremely important, and we've talked about support networks. I think there has to be, your family has to really kind of be brought into what you are going to be doing. I think they will be supportive if you are as honest with them as possible, especially about the importance of your job. Because all of these women sitting here, you've had critical jobs, critical moments when you needed to be available for the job. And sometimes that meant, and I found I'm a mom, my son is now 25 years old. He did not become a serial killer. And yes, he was in daycare. We had a village. I mean, Hillary Clinton was not lying. It definitely takes a village when you take on these important jobs. And if you're in intelligence or national security or in law enforcement, you are going to have to take the call sometimes and interrupt dinner. You are going to have to be overseas. There were times when I really couldn't tell my family what was going on. And you need to prepare them for that, because just like you would get your feelings hurt if it seems like you're not including them, especially think about your parents. Your parents are worried for you. And so I think that's really important, that women as caregivers, we like to take on all these things. We want to be the best spouses, the best mothers. And sometimes, I mean, I used to laugh because my son would come to me and he'd say, "Mommy, you never go on any of the day trips with school." And I said, well, what can mommy do? And so what mommy would do sometimes is go to school and talk about her job. And I remember the day that they said, an FBI agent is coming in and they are going to tell you about being in the FBI. And when I walked in, the kids' faces actually sort of dropped, because it was like, no, you're David's mother. How can you be an FBI agent? So, but being honest with them, and having supportive significant others, understand that I'm sure some of you have gotten some very important phone calls, and you just, you're not hurting them or choosing them, you're choosing maybe your country that day. So especially, this is advice for women who want to go into national security, public safety, or support to those fields. That's pretty important work. And I would suggest that one thing I think I've learned from other men and women is how, that is a part of our job and it's important. And so that's important mentoring too, that sometimes we want to appear as supermen or superwomen, and often we have to tell people honestly, this is going to be more than a 9-to-5 job perhaps. And I think that kind of honest exchange with ourselves and our families is especially important for women, because we hate to disappoint anyone at any time. And then I just want to add one quick story. I used to teach at Penn State, and I can remember the young women would come in and they'd gotten a C in a class and they'd just be so devastated. And, what am I going to do? And then the next person would walk in would be one of the young guys, and they're like, "Hey, professor, I got a C. I mean, man, I knocked it out of the park." And so I think there is, to echo some of what you've said, we have such high expectations for ourselves often as women. And I think sometimes we have to give ourselves a break. But get those strong support systems out there that understand the critical nature of the work you're going to be doing. And they'll be okay if you don't make the best cookies in the world, because you're going to have some of the best stories to share if you're allowed to.
If you're allowed to.
Jennifer, can I get off of that for a second?
Sure, Ellen.
Because I think that I love that you went there. I'll tell you though, this is getting back to the voice in your head, because I can't tell you how many women who say, I can't do that job because I have kids or I have an elderly parent. And I will tell you that there's very few jobs that you can't manage. Of course, you need to have a support network, but I think it gets to having that discussion with the folks before you count yourself out. Explain that I am a mother of 2 children, or I'm taking care of an elderly parent, and I will be here when the rubber meets the road. But having that discussion is so incredibly important, because I can't tell you how many women, Jennifer, have said, I can't do that because of this. And you have no idea what you can or can't do until you've actually sat down and talked to the folks. Because there's a lot of things that can be done. That there's very few jobs that I think you can't do and still have a life. And also, Jennifer, I use I'm laying on my deathbed at 140, and what decision I'm going to regret? Am I going to regret not making it to that soccer game, or I'm going to regret not going on this trip because of this? And usually the answer is pretty obvious. And so I think that I'm laying on my deathbed at 140 rule is something that really works.
Okay,
Absolutely.
Early
on in the FBI, I walked in and I looked around and I'm like, men are doing these jobs. They have families, they have children. So, okay, I got to get that out of my head because men have been having really important jobs for years, and now we can show women can do it too, and still have children, still have parents, and yeah. So, and then the other thing, once you get in the workforce, I think shaping. I was one of the first people to suggest we would have part-time employees at the bureau in a laboratory because we lost many of our women when they would have children and they couldn't come back full-time for a period of time right after having their children. So I said, well, let's bring them back part-time. I mean, these were laboratorians we had invested a lot of time in, you know, for training. I mean, I know it may shock you, but they used to take the credentials from women, FBI agents who were pregnant. It would take their guns and credentials away from them. So now as a female manager, you have to get in there and you have to say, okay, we're not doing that anymore. So I think once you get into an organization, shape it so that it can be more, I don't know, friendly, family friendly, or, you know, gender non-specific, let's put it that way. So.
Yeah, and Tish, do you mind
You
if
gotta
I
tell
just
me
jump
why.
in?
Sorry, why did they take their guns and credentials?
Because they weren't physically.
They weren't coming back.
I was told that they took them away because they weren't physically.
Everybody's talking at the same time here. Jennifer, when was that? How
So
recent?
that was actually, so I got in '86, and that was actually, you know, in the, I mean, it didn't happen to me, but I was the first pregnant unit manager they'd ever had in the FBI laboratory system. So I was the first one, and at that point in time, no, they weren't taking my guns or creds away, but it had certainly been done prior to that because I think they anticipated women weren't coming back. So this would have been, you know, right in that time. And again, I'm old, so it's not happening.
Older, not old.
Older.
And yes, hopefully not happening today. Matisse, I'll come to you next, but Tracy, you were trying to say a reason we're taking.
When I was a special agent at Quantico, you know, people would ask, obviously, about that policy that Jennifer was talking about, and what our supervisor had said. Was it because, you know, when women are pregnant, they are not physically capable of doing the same things in the field, therefore they're technically medically injured, and so they cannot have their gun.
And this was some time ago.
Yes.
Question. Okay. Not today.
No.
Matisse, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was just going to add to what Jennifer said about, you know, I think when you are a culture breaker or a barrier breaker, you do have to be rather innovative about why you should still be able to contribute. And in order to do that, that really does take courage because you're kind of going against the system's normal processes and procedures to introduce a brand new thing to maximize opportunities for the pregnant woman or for the woman who wants to carry her gun or whatever the system is. And so, again, you know, and I applaud you, Jennifer, because the courage it took to come up with the idea of, oh, how about part-time work as being something to complement the normal processes and procedures. That's very courageous to do that. And you have to have the competence to understand the system. As the ambassador was saying, she didn't quite understand some of the things. But if you know how the system can be maneuvered around or adjusted to embrace the larger capability set, which now introduces women into these non-female dominant environments, I think that takes great courage and competence of the system. So thank you for sharing that, Jennifer.
I think it does indeed. So well said, Matisse. I'm going to roll two questions into one for the ambassador. So a question I had was, what is an effective way that men can play a role in promoting the development and success of their female colleagues? And let me just add to that an audience question that we have received from Michael Walsh. As one of the males watching this podcast, what can we do better to stop those doubting voices in your head? I used to have several women that would not apply for leadership roles because, as Ellen said, I have children. I always replied with, well, so does your husband. So, you know, Jennifer, to your point, and Michael, thank you for that question, and thank you for your support of women and saying, well, yeah, your husband has children as well. So we've had a couple of suggestions there. Ambassador, if you have anything to add, and then more broadly, how can men be more supportive?
Yeah, I love both of those questions, so thank you. So on the supportive side, and I think that might be the flip side of the same coin, insofar as you are seen to be a supporter, a sponsor, an enabler, so too will increase the confidence of women, to put themselves forward, because they are going to find a welcome when they do, and or increase their confidence as well as their competence of, we're ready to do it even if we don't find a welcome. So my 7 things for what men can do, and this is for the men in the audience, and this is for the women in the audience, about what we should be expecting from our male cohorts and allies. Number 1, watch the mirroring. You've heard the term. If you've taken unconscious bias training, which is hiring people like yourself, apples, choosing apples, as I heard it over at DOD. It is a natural thing to do. It's an easy thing to do. I know when I've been interviewing people, if you are a lively, extroverted woman who likes to talk and engage, I'm going to click with you immediately. Not that that's the best person for me to choose, either to work with, work for, or have someone working for me, because I need to be balanced. So I have to go past my initial connection with the person and really identify what are the things that this position needs. And it isn't just another good friend for me. What does the position need? And that makes me go beyond my inclination to mirror. Number 2, something that Ellen mentioned about saying things in a meeting and finding that it didn't get heard when she said it, but it gets heard if some male person says it. Amplify our voices. When you hear us say something in a meeting, don't let it pass by. Or if you hear suddenly a man says it and everybody is, saying great idea, call it back to the person who originated the idea. And ladies, we can do this for ourselves. I've often given out tips 4 or 5. One that immediately comes to my mind, if you said it and then Brian says it 5 minutes later and everybody's saying, oh, Brian, great, great. That is your opportunity to say, Brian, thank you so much for really understanding the point I was making a few moments ago. Or Steve, that's great that you got me. Or Alan, as I was saying, I don't get mad about it because it used to infuriate me, but that didn't do me any good. I had to take back the mic in a way that wasn't aggressive, because we're female, have to be nice, wasn't aggressive, wasn't overtly annoyed, just matter of fact, thank you, as I was saying, and take back the mic. Men, help us out on that. Number 3, gentlemen, you need to assert that you also do not want to be in any position, given any leadership position, assignment, promotion. You don't want that because of affirmative action. You don't want that because you are male or because you are white, any more than we as women want to be given something because of our gender, or minorities, underrepresented populations want something because of our color or our disability. We all want to feel like we earned the positions. We earned our place. We work hard to do that. And you need to work hard to do that too. So, I've had, quiet conversations with women or with other minorities, or like, oh, should we do this? We don't want to be considered an affirmative action candidate or a diversity candidate. But I want to make sure that the guys are saying, oh, I don't want to be considered, I'm only getting it because I'm a guy and they like guys. That's no good for you. It's no good for us. So make that an overt statement as well. Join us. Number 4, call out the nonsense when you hear it. I urge everyone to take some sort of bystander intervention training. It works if you see women in difficult positions or anyone in a difficult position, but it also works when you hear, bad jokes or insensitive statements made, or criticisms that are not based on the person's ability, but some part of their protected class or other aspect of their person. Don't stand silently by, and certainly don't come by after and say, oh, I'm so sorry that didn't work out for you. I'm so sorry you had to hear that. It doesn't do us any good coming after the fact. You need to speak up in the moment, in the moment. And that goes for all of us, because we can all be great allies for each other. Speak up in the moment. Take the training if you're uncertain about how to do it, because there are already really excellent tried and true ways of doing this that don't bring aggression or a program or otherwise negative aspects to you if you do it in the right way, but you must do it. Number 5, recognize, I know this is sounding woke or politically correct, but I don't know a quicker way of saying it, and we only have so much time. Recognize your privilege, gentlemen. Let me give you an example. I had a boss, lovely, lovely, lovely person. And he was the boss. And he came into the organization. We've all been there. We worked hard for where we are, but political appointee was the boss. And he would say from time to time, if people were asking him questions or raising an issue, he'd say, oh, I don't understand that yet. You know, I don't understand how that works. Or I don't get that yet. And it used to infuriate me, because here was a white male, let me be clear here, who was saying he didn't get something, and he was saying it in a room full of people who worked for him. And yet there is no way a woman or a minority could sit at the head of the table and say, I don't understand that, and expect chuckles, understanding chuckles around the table for such a statement. That was his white male privilege, because he still expected to be respected and deferred to in that position, even as he voiced his unpreparedness to take care of business in that moment. But we all deferred, we all continued to give him respect. But that was a privilege that women and minorities do not have. And I don't think he ever recognized that he was in his privilege to say such a thing. It was 5. Number 6, something that Tish said, when, you know, I can't find a woman, can't find a Hispanic, can't find a Negro, can't find, where are the good ones? They're all taken, you know, they're all off in the private sector making money. We can't get them in the government, or wherever you are and somebody says you can't find them. Yes, we're out there, find us. There are many organizations now, particularly in the national security space. There is a Leadership Council for Women in National Security. Women ready to go. And many of us have joined government, rejoined government. The Women of Color Advancing Peace and Security, National Security, hardcore, doing counterterrorism, cyber, nuclear issues. All, and you can go to the internet and find hundreds of women out in national security, diversity in national security, full of women, full of underrepresented minorities, underrepresented populations in the national security field. So no one has an excuse anymore to say you can't find, because we figured out that people were saying that, and people put together these organizations and gathered exceptional people who are serving in or ready to serve in any capacity in the national security field. And finally, as Jennifer mentioned, the importance of supporting your partner and women demanding that support, not demanding that support, expecting that support. If you are in a family unit, I used to smack people when they said, oh, I got to babysit my kids. I said, you can't babysit your own kids. You're parenting. Come babysit my kid. Yours, you are just being a father. You are just being a parent. So that decision about who you choose as your partner, most important decision you will ever make. And I'm telling you, I went off to USUN as the senior advisor for the Middle East when Dick Holbrook was the USUN head of the ambassador to the United Nations, and had my lovely flat. I won't tell you how much the rent was every month because it was a short-term lease, and living my New York life. And my husband and my 2 small children, my daughter was 5 at the time. and my son would have been 8, and everybody moved mommy into her apartment, and I was sitting on Roosevelt Island with a picnic before they headed back to DC, and my daughter has long, thick, curly, lustrous hair, and I noticed a little bug in her head just before they got back in the car. I assumed it dropped out of the tree, but it was head lice. And yes, my poor husband had to take her home and deal with that in Washington, DC, while I was doing very important work in New York. So choose your partners well, because whenever we get in a fight, that's what he brings up. Thank you for the question.
Ambassador, that was a terrific list. A couple of new things for me. I wrote them all down, and I really appreciate the stories, as I think the audience does as well. Speaking of the audience, it is time to turn to audience questions. So please, a reminder, if you have questions, submit them through the questions box on the right side of your screen. And Northrop Grumman is our sponsor for audience engagement today. I will tell you, we have a ton of questions rolling in. So let's start with, and this will be jump ball, if you will. So whoever would like to answer this, how important are connections to getting those senior positions?
Can I take it, Tish?
Let's start with Matisse, and then Ellen will go to you.
Yeah, so I think absolutely connections are super important. And, throughout my 30 years in national security, I started at the Naval Academy. So I was there with, 1,000 of my classmates. And when people see your capabilities and your competence, that just sets up a path that you don't know how it's going to come about in the future. But having those connections and having people know you reputationally, as well as personally and professionally, I think are super important. And a part of the earlier question talked about mentors. And, I've actually never had anyone in my kind of career path that has looked exactly like me. Certainly when I was going through aviation training, I didn't know any Black female aviators, just didn't know any in my personal life or in the Navy or any other service. So I just gleaned onto the guys that I thought were the best at what I was trying to do. So I tried to track a mentor that could provide me with the competence that I needed to perform in the role that I was performing in. And that's, Tish, you mentioned that Booz Allen. One of the things I absolutely love about being here at Booz Allen over the past 6 months, this is the most number of senior women I've ever worked with in my 30-year career. I mean, my boss is a woman. I've actually never had a boss. Actually, when I was a White House fellow, my boss somewhat was a woman. But this is like my first real experience. So if I had waited until now to get a mentor to help connect me to future opportunities, I would have been way behind the position that I'm in today. So to the question, to answer the question more directly, connections are super important in national security. They start with reputation and your proficiency, and then getting out and just being social and networking and helping other people is also important to helping yourself in the long run. So thanks for the question.
Ellen, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, adding to what Matisse said, for so long, I thought that networking was schmoozing. And I knew so many people who were very good at schmoozing, but they weren't necessarily the best at their job. So for a long time, I just thought, I'm going to work really hard, and then good things are going to happen. And I'll say from about like GS9 to GS15, for the most part, that worked. It really was that leap to senior executive that I learned. And that's not to suggest that the audience should wait until then, but that's when I learned from some women in my world that said, look, you got to get out, Ellen. I mean, you got to stop. I was working in the Navy, had pretty much stayed in the Navy my whole career. And she said, you need to get out and start meeting people, talking to people, networking. And again, that voice was telling me, well, that's just schmoozing. I don't want to schmooze. It's not schmoozing. It is an investment in yourself. It takes time. It takes effort. but it's something that you have to do or you should do your whole career. I started late. I think I've picked it up since then. But I will tell you, I schedule time in my calendar to meet someone for lunch, to meet someone for coffee, to reach out on social media, to stay connected. And I'll tell you, it tended to be women who helped me in that next leap. It was women who were calling secretaries of departments saying, hey, have you heard about Ellen, while they're flying to Saudi Arabia? You know, I found it was the women in my world that really took a very active role on my behalf. So I would just encourage all of you, don't wait till you're at GEOS 15. Don't wait till you're later in your career. Do it when you begin. It's an investment in yourself. Do both. It's not easy, but it's absolutely worth it.
So really terrific answers from both of you. And I would just add that network has work in it. It is part of work. It is an investment in yourself. And like you, Ellen, I learned that a little late in my career. Trying to make up for lost time though. So Tracy, we have a couple of questions for you, and I am going to combine them, if you will, because they're both about your book. This is from Amanda Lux at NGA. She read your book last year, completely inspired by your story. Do you believe the intelligence community has done enough to recruit and retain women? How do you think we as women should advocate for ourselves as intelligence professionals and promote a comfortable workspace for future women? And let me just add, because there's a piece that in another question that's just a little different. Advice to someone brand new in the IC. I think you kind of answered that one already. So how are we doing at recruiting and retaining women? And is there something we should be doing differently?
So I'll try to be as frank as I can in my answer, and hopefully I don't offend or upset anyone. I think for me, my experience in the intelligence community was a little bit different. I was obviously not a senior level executive, but I worked at the CIA, obviously on the operations side, and then transitioned to the FBI as a special agent. And the biggest thing for me was the cultural shift that came with both of those. That was really difficult, and I will admit that I was a bit naive. I assumed that the culture surrounding women would be similar, but what I saw at the CIA, the gathering of intelligence, I have since learned upon reflection, is somewhat of a female sport, if you will. It involves a lot of soft skills, meaning empathy, critical thinking, problem solving, those kinds of things. And I found that I had a lot of success and felt that I was treated, I wouldn't say completely equitably, but, very fairly for the most part. I think the ambassador was talking about how, we need men to sort of, I would say, stand up for us and not take away our thoughts and our ideas. And I will never forget, this was September 12th, 2001, when I was sitting in the Counterterrorism Center, and I was in a meeting at the 7th floor, and I did say something, but I was very young and quiet about it, and I don't know if you all know who Charlie Allen is. He heard what I had to say, and someone else started saying what I had to say, and he very loudly told that person to stop it and wanted to hear what I had to say. And so, to the ambassador's point, that was very important. That was a huge turning point for me in terms of taking back my idea, or taking back, what I thought. I would say at the FBI, it was a little difficult being a woman there. I came to find out that, women were not allowed to be special agents until really 1972, 73. I didn't know that going in there. And then Dr. Smith, you were way ahead of your game and your time, and I think that that's incredibly impressive. But as a female there, what I found was that the expectations of what people thought they had of what an FBI agent should do were very different than what we look like. And sometimes as a female, that can be very difficult when they assume that it's a member of a SWAT team, I guess, breaking down a door. And quite frankly, a woman can do that if she wants to. But I think we had those stereotypes, and pop culture really doesn't do us any services sometimes. And right now, I do know that the FBI is experiencing a little bit of difficulty in terms of recruiting women, diverse women, to be in special agent positions. And I don't know if it's because of pop culture and what we're seeing, or if it's because of several issues that I'm seeing surrounding women and the treatment of women, and women coming forward because maybe they are feeling more empowered too, with difficulties that they're having. But I think the FBI is struggling a little bit in terms of their retention and recruitment of women, particularly in the special agent realm.
Thank you, Tracy. I will tell you, we have so many audience questions, and I just got the 5-minute warning. So I am going to move to a lightning round and try and incorporate as many of the audience questions as I can. So a lightning round is, I'll ask a question and I want a quick, short, brief answer from each of you. And I'll call out who, and I'm just going to go around the squares on my screen. So the first question is, Ambassador Abercrombie Winstanley, considering your success, what challenges do you still have in the workplace, if any? If any.
All of them. There's my answer.
All
Listen,
right.
this is it's not a daily battle. This is a continuing challenge. Things are certainly better, but we have to be vigilant and we have to be attentive, frankly, on a daily basis. We really do. And this is just, it's human nature. It's easier to do things the easy way, and the easy way isn't the right way. And so it's a daily challenge still.
Okay. Dr. Smith.
Well, I think the biggest challenge right now is what the culture is pushing on us, which is, I think we still have to be thorough. We have to be, we can't put everything in a tweet. So I think you have to stick to your specialty and what you know, speak your voice, and be thorough in it, especially for these complex problems that folks are facing in these important fields. And sometimes women are very good at that. We really gather the facts. We are thorough, and so stay the course. Keep going. Be as thorough as possible, because I think that is just a cultural shift, and that's probably true for men and women, to be honest. But be as thorough as possible as we work through these very difficult problems.
Okay. Thorough as possible. Tracy, challenges and how do you overcome?
So obviously I'm not in the intelligence community anymore. I'm a professor of criminal justice. I think for me, my biggest issue is actually being underestimated. I spend a good 20 minutes of my very first class of the year having to explain, why am I qualified to teach this class when I am the only former female law enforcement officer on faculty. Students just sort of walk in and are like, well, who are you? Oh, that's nice. You're just, and that's really frustrating for me. So I would say I would like to see that change, that we can just accept people for who they are. But that would be my biggest challenge.
And it's a good one, unfortunately. It's still with us in 2021. Matisse, how about you?
Yeah, I think the challenge that still or the thing that still challenges me in the workplace is, when you are a trailblazer, you're changing a culture, and not everyone in that culture will be happy about you becoming a part of the culture and changing things. So the majority of the people, your colleagues, may embrace you and say, wow, this is great, and who knew that there had never been, and fill in the blank. But then there are going to be some people that are still just going, wait a minute, why do we have to change? And And I think that's a big reason why I have the credential set that I have. You know, Naval Academy, Harvard, Hopkins are my schools of choice. And then just going after the hard jobs throughout my career. And any day I'm willing to say, hey, you know, you want to compare our resumes, but that's not really what you want to be saying to your colleagues. So I've kind of taken, over the years, I've taken a different stance. When one of my colleagues is kind of scratching their head and saying, I don't see why you had to be let in, you know, diversity matters. Diversity of thought matters. And I'll tell you that the differentiator in the cockpit was if someone had the answer and you were declaring emergency, you didn't care what they looked like if they could help you get on the ground safely. And that's what I'm also learning and trying to drive home with the colleagues that may not be as embracing of the change that an organization has in mind when they bring me into the boardroom, for example. But yeah, that's a constant challenge every day, and I don't expect it, unfortunately, to go away.
But it sounds like you have the right approach to overcome that. So well said. Ellen.
I love Matisse. I love Matisse's answer. That was where I was going to go, but so I'll just riff off of that. I think the culture piece, but I think it's leadership, and I'm not saying there's an absence of leadership, but an understanding that you're a leader at every level in an organization. And I think at least from my experience over 30 years in the intelligence community, that we have people that are afraid to take on that role because they're afraid that they may not get that promotion, or they may not. I think we're a little more risk averse right now because the world just feels like, you know, with misinformation and the fact that we have to be so agile in this community right now. We have to be hugely innovative. The world that we live in today is so much different than when I started during the Cold War. And so our challenges are much more diverse, are much more complicated. And the reality is it takes a village of leaders to fix this. It takes courage to be able to speak up as a young employee at Booz Allen or a young employee at Office of Naval Intelligence to say, let's do it this way. What about this? And Tish, I was always very grateful to you because leadership was something that your whole career have really put a focus on. And I would encourage the leaders in the IC today to really look at that. It's just so incredibly important. And that's how you're going to get the culture change you need. Through encouraging folks to understand that they're leaders at every level in an organization, to communicate clearly about what our goals and expectations are, and to reward people for successes and to reward people for taking a chance and maybe failing.
Well said, Ellen. And I would just like to say to all of you that I think you gave some very good advice to our entire audience today, both women and men. So thank you so much for joining today. Thank you for your leadership, your candor, your insights. It really was a terrific start for our week ahead. Once again, thank you to SAIC as well as all of our sponsors whose support ensures we can deliver this type of programming. And if you were late to this afternoon's program, all registered attendees will be emailed links to all session recordings next week. And looking ahead, tomorrow at 2 p.m., we will hold our diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion panel that is gratis for all. So please spread the word with all of your networks. Wednesday at 2, we will be empowering the next generation of female leaders. And then Thursday at 2 p.m., Lieutenant General Mary O'Brien, the Air Force Deputy Chief of Staff for ISR Effects Operations, will deliver keynote remarks, followed by a moderated Q&A with the Honorable Sue Gordon. And then later that day, we will hold our first in-person networking event in nearly 16 months at Grand Cru in Arlington. I am very much looking forward to seeing many of you there. If you have not registered yet, please do so. And then finally, on Friday, we close out with a conversation with the CIO of the CIA, Julianne Galina, and her sister, Chris Lovejoy, who is the global head of cybersecurity for Ernst & Young. They will share their experiences rising to the top in male-dominated fields and the importance of strong female role models. Thank you to everyone for attending today, and we look forward to welcoming you back tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern. Have a good rest of the day.